What isn't working with this Predators roster, and what is Barry Trotz rumored to be doing about it? We'll discuss that, and we're going to revisit an off-season Trevor Zegras conversation on today's Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We are, of course, your free daily Nashville Predators podcast. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off our Tuesday episode welcoming any first-time listeners and, of course, giving a hearty shout out to our everydayers and our Locked On Predators Insiders community. I am Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer with Penalty Box Radio, and my friends, I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Emma Lingen, and I'm the Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
Well, Emma, we both know Nashville made some big moves in the offseason, but even longtime Predators players are struggling out of the gate. On yesterday's 32 Thoughts podcast, Elliotte Friedman gave some insight into what Barry Trotz may be doing about it. We're going to talk about that. Plus, we're going to revisit a debate about the appeal of Trevor Zegras. Before we dive into that, want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Still searching for a great candidate for your company? Don't search, just match with Indeed. All right, Emma, you and I have been asked ad nauseum repeatedly by a number of different places. What is going on with the Nashville Predators? Are you surprised by the start? And I think we're both pretty surprised by the struggle out of the gate. But for me, the biggest surprise is not the new players struggling to get up to speed. You and I, we tried to tell y'all. But for me, it's that the familiar faces that we really need to count on are sort of struggling out of the gate. Would you agree that that's been a surprise to you to just kick off this season?
Yes and no. I mean, I would also say, frankly, a pleasant surprise is that UC Saros has not had a slow start. Usually he's the one you can count on to have a slow start out of the gate. This year, it's like he's the only one that isn't. You know, I think that we've seen from some guys, like Philip Forsberg had a good start. He's kind of cooled off of late. But other guys, you're right, like Roman Josi, again, we saw it with him last year. It took him a little bit longer to kind of warm up, and you know, he eventually became a Norris finalist. So not too worried there, but yeah, I think that that's kind of, we expected this from the new guys with how long it took last year's team to get up to speed with Andrew Burnett's system. I mean, literally up to speed because it's very fast, and it took them more than half a season to figure it out. And so I think that we were expecting that with the new guys, but I guess, you know, it makes sense the more you think about it, though, with like how disjointed they have seemed as a 5-man unit, because it is a team sport. I mean, not to be like duh, but it just like you don't really think of it that way. You think, oh, that's okay, the guys who were here last year will drag the new guys into the fight and they'll figure this out together. But no, it's like if one piece or one part isn't clicking, it really just kind of, you know, the whole thing falls apart.
Well, and there really are very few times when the 5-man unit on the ice doesn't have a new component to it. You know, whether it is a new face or whether it is a new combination or a new defensive pairing. So it is a little new. I think what tricked me, and you mentioned this, is how quickly they kind of got it towards the end of last season. And I think because it kind of clicked all of the sudden-ish, you know, after, you know, the All-Star break and when they went on this run, I sort of thought, okay, they're going to pick up where they left off, these familiar faces, and that they really haven't been able to do that. And it's sort of changed what Nashville has been able to accomplish, not based on new faces, but familiar faces. And look, you know, everybody on the team has to kind of up their game. So I'm not saying that this slow start is any specific player's problems, but like there are a couple that I'm a little concerned about. One of them is Tommy Novak. Of course, coming off of an injury. He's only played 13 games, which, my friends, it's a small sample size. I know no matter how many games he plays, some of you aren't going to like his contract, but 13 games is a small sample size, but only has 3 goals, 1 assist. And for me, the concern with Novak is not so much his production, but his placement, because, you and he looked great at the beginning of training camp. He looked comfortable. He looked confident. He was playing with Marchessault and Stamkos, and we were like, okay. And then kind of towards the end of training camp, it just sort of wasn't as there. What I think is interesting is of his 3 goals, none of those 3 or his assist came when he was on the ice with Stamkos or Marchessault. It was when he was kind of on that, quote unquote kid line, although Jankowski and Novak, like, they're old enough to buy beer, y'all. Or he was on the second power play unit. So for me, I think the thing that's so different about Novak than what I expected is his placement and not his production. But it's been a concern that he hasn't been the guy to really unlock something on that second line center spot, which was a question going in. But initially at training camp, I thought, okay, Tommy Novak.
I mean, it was a question. I think, when they signed him to that contract last year, that's obviously the ultimate goal, is for him to lock up that 2C. Maybe he wasn't a 2C yet, but the belief was that he could be. And but in order to get him there, you got to give him the chance. It's like when you're, out of college applying for jobs, and every entry level job requires 5 years experience. It's like, well, how am I going to get the experience if every job requires experience? So I think that's kind of where I'm at with Tommy Novak, is like, I'm not going to sit here and say, yes, 100% he's a 2C. I'm saying we don't know if he is, because he's not being given the chance. He may not be, and that's fine. But I think that, we saw him opening night against Dallas. He was on that second line with Stamkos and Marchessault. Something, and I agreed with this, that Andrew Brunette said after the game, they needed a little bit of a shakeup, because it wasn't quite working. And it wasn't, and he said this too, it wasn't like, oh, Novak is the problem, move him down. It was just like, no, we just need something. We need a spark here. And I agreed with that. I agreed with that move. He switched Novak and Sissons. They ended up scoring in that period. They scored in the third period, made it a 1-goal game with Dallas. So it was like, all right, well, okay. But then it was like he never got a chance again after that at that 2C position. And it was, never got a real chance. Any time, it just seemed like he got the hook so quickly. Like the moment, the team went behind in a game, like fell behind or something, it was like immediately, take Novak, move him. Yeah. And it's just like, all right. I get it. I understand it. And I'm not sitting here saying he is a 2C, but I'm saying we don't know what he is, because it's like he's not being allowed to really graduate from the bottom 6, which, it is a tough position to be in, because he does play very well with Tommy Novak. He is Tommy Novak. He plays very well with Luke Evangelista, and those two had been on the third line together. So, and then, you get them with a Mark Jankowski, who's kind of the big body. He can post up in front of the net, and you got those other 2 guys who can make the plays. And I think that's, it profiles well. But then with Novak coming out while he was injured, Parsonen came in, and that kid line really clicked. Now Novak's back. It looks like Tomasino's out. So it's just kind of like, all right, what are we doing here? Like, where is his placement, like you said?
Well, and it's hard to figure out, and it's hard to give grace. And this is the conundrum for the Predators when they start 0-5. You can't sacrifice games for chemistry, because you already need the points. And so it does feel like that situation makes the leash shorter for Tommy Novak. And you go back to, well, gosh, could he develop chemistry at a 2C position if given the opportunity? But you just can't afford an opportunity for it not to work, because you've got to have points. You mentioned Colton Sissons. This is another one. One of our insiders was like, hey, like Colton Sissons, not the same Colton Sissons that we're used to seeing. 18 games, 2 goals, no assists. Colton Sissons, one of his superpowers really and truly is that he goes up and down the lineup. Like, he is literally Mr. Potato Head. You can put the arm, the hat, the eyeball in any number of holes, and he is still Mr. Potato Head. But it's been really tough for him because he has been on the fourth line, which is a very different role. He's then centered Stamkos and Marchessault. That's a very different role. Last night, he was with Stamkos and Evangelista, which was a line I was so excited about. But if you look at it, they played so much time in the defensive zone. They really didn't have much of a chance to show you what that line could do offensively. And when you see him with no assists, that's disappointing because what you want from Sissons is, of course, scoring, but you want him to dish the puck. And that just hasn't happened, you know? So there are a couple of players that we just aren't seeing quite doing what we know they probably could do. And the situation may not provide them with the opportunity to do it. So what's happening now? Well, Barry Trotz is looking around. We know that Nashville is looking for a center. There is one center that Emma and I in the offseason said no way to. We're going to revisit this Trevor Zegras conversation. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Just like your favorite sports team, we are all driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/locked-on. Just go to Indeed.com/locked-on right now and let them know you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Again, that's Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, Emma, NHL insider Elliotte Friedman on yesterday's 32 Thoughts podcast in a segment he calls Quickies. Mentioned that the Nashville Predators are looking for a center, not a news flash, but also this one, I was like, so you don't say, Elliotte Friedman. They're looking for a top 4 defenseman. Of course, we know Nashville not rolling in the dough after spending $108 million in the offseason. And you have to kind of be careful when you talk about how much cap space the Preds have, because, of course, still waiting on good old Ryan Johansson's situation to sort out. When you hear they're looking for a top 4 defenseman, Emma, and this is somebody that Elliotte Friedman seems to think is not a rental. Like, this is a guy that they want to sign to term. What do you think about that? And how important is getting a top 4 defenseman for the Predators right now?
I think I was a little bit surprised by that. I mean, I guess, trying to get a center, get in line. So is everyone else in the league right now. But I think that it's interesting. I don't really know what that means. I think what it doesn't mean is that they've given up on Brady Shea already. Because I've seen some people saying that. I don't think it means that. I think it means, and I'm not reporting. This is my informed speculation. I would not be shocked if if they are going to try and trade for a top 4 defenseman. I would not, you mentioned the cap space. They're in a situation now where they can't just trade prospects. They're going to have to offload someone from the NHL roster. So I would not be surprised if they would trade either Jeremy Lauzon or Alex Carrier. I wouldn't be surprised. Just because Lausanne has not had the best start to the year. Carrier, again, you kind of expect a little bit more from him offensively than he's been able to give. We saw he was very valuable, like he was very highly valued on the trade market last year. I think all of us thought that he was going to be gone by the deadline last year. He ended up staying. So that was, I think that he definitely has value. I think neither of them really, particularly Lausanne, I don't know that really he profiles as a top 4 defenseman, but that is the role that they have been tasked to play. Now, the problem, the reason that I would lean towards keeping Carrier over Lausanne, both are very good at killing penalties, but Alex Carrier is a really, really important part of that number 1 ranked penalty kill. So I like to think that Lausanne's also a very affordable contract right now. I think that he would be more easily movable. I think the problem is, again, because he's so affordable, is that going to clear enough cap space to get a legitimate top 4 defenseman on your roster? I don't know. But I think that, I don't know. I guess he's looking at, not a rental again, because this is not a do or die year for Nashville as much as everyone likes to think that it is. It's not. None of these guys are on expiring contracts. So it seems like people are forgetting that. But I think that, maybe something to kind of extend the window there. I really don't know. Like it's a little puzzling when you just put Dante Fabro on waivers and he's now a top 4 defenseman, a top 2 defenseman in Columbus. And now you're looking for a top 4 defense. I don't know. I've been struggling with this one. I'm like, I don't really know what that means, to be honest with you, but it's a little surprising.
It's surprising to me as well, and I'm glad you said that, because I'm like, what puzzle piece am I missing here? Because this really surprised me. Because if you look at the Predators pipeline, you've got some defensemen who in the next season or 2 are going to be ready to maybe take that step into the NHL. So to me, when I hear Barry Trotz is out now making calls about a top 4 defenseman, I'm like, he's not giving up on this particular season yet. It seems odd to go out and get a long-term, try to find somebody and make it a long-term move when you've got Ufko and Wilsby, who's been called up, hasn't made his NHL debut. But don't forget, we've got Andrew Gibson. You've got Tanner Mullendijk in the pipeline. We don't know what's happening with Spencer Stasny. So I don't know if this information is a reflection of Barry Trotz may or may not know what that situation is. Again, that's pure speculation. And that's as much as I would ever want to speculate on anything with Spencer Stasny. God go with him and hope he's doing great. So the top 4 defenseman situation, very interesting. And like you said, everybody's looking for a center. Finding a center in the league is like trying to get a Cabbage Patch doll on Christmas Eve in 1984. You're going to have to beat some people up and claw and draw blood to walk out with the Cabbage Patch doll center that you want. And for Nashville, you're looking for somebody, and it feels a little more urgent because you've added Stamkos and Marchessault, and they haven't really gotten a chance to find a center that's already on the roster to unlock them. Like we talked about, Novak really we haven't seen it. Sissons really haven't seen it. And you're getting to crunch time with this team where it's like, okay, you know what? It's serious. We need to get somebody. Is Barry Trotz going to be able to get a center with cap space and, the shortage of centers? Is he going to run through Walmart like it's 1984?
Now, no.
Yeah.
It's just not going to be. No one's trading anyone like of that caliber right now. It's too early. Close to the deadline, we could be having another conversation. But I think, it's hard because again, it's supply and demand, right? And centers typically get paid more than wingers, and the market for centers is very hot right now. It's definitely, not a buyer's market. So I think that it's going to drive prices up, prices in terms of, what a potential return could be, especially if you're looking for a center with control, who's still under team control, who's not a rental. It's tough. And I think that we're in a very different situation than we have been before with the Predators. With, like, in the last few years, it's always been, it's funny for me, even I've been covering this team. This is my third season covering the team. The first 2 seasons, it was always like, oh, well, they have all the draft capital, they have the prospects, they can put together a nice little package and get someone, and they always had the cap space. Now they don't have the cap space. So if you want to add someone to your NHL roster, someone's got to go. And it's very interesting. And, it's like, that's kind of, I go back to what I said. I mentioned Dante Fabro earlier. When he was waived, I said on the show, the day that happened, I said, look, I am trying very hard to withhold judgment until I see what the grand plan is here, because it's like, clearly with waiving Dante Fabro, you get 2.5 million off of the books, and that alone is not going to buy you a number 2 center, but it could go towards that. And so I think that, I'm waiting to see if this all comes together and it all is like, we're able to pull off a trade and get a good center that they can afford. I don't know what that looks like right now, especially when no one's trading right now. It's November. It's
slow season, y'all.
Yeah.
It's slow season. The one name that has popped back up again is somebody that Emma and I in the off season said no thank you to, but let's revisit a little conversation about Trevor Zegras. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you have to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you could watch the winnings roll in. It's the way daily fantasy sports should be played. It's not you against 1,000 strangers. It's just you against the Prize Picks projections for your favorite players in your favorite sports. Prize Picks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When your picks hit, you can withdraw your money in as quick as 15 minutes. Download the Prize Pick app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNHL on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. So check out all the action at Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, Emma, we talked about this at length in the offseason. Trevor Zegras to Nashville. The Cliff Notes version of that episode, y'all. Hard pass with a side of hell, no. But if we're learning that Nashville doesn't quite have enough to get by in the center arena, Trevor Zegras comes in at 23 years old. He is a really interesting bridge piece when you're looking at kind of 2 windows for Nashville, the now and the not yet window. And there is a part of me that says, bring in Zegras, see what he can do with, I don't know, Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault. Get him experience with players of that caliber. That would benefit him. But he is also a piece that would hang around a while and still be a part of a not yet window down the road. But there's a lot of questions, friends. First of all, you have to ask yourself, is Nashville an appealing place for anyone to come to with the way that they started right now? I think it's a little bit different when you're 23 versus when you are 32, because if you're 32, you really are feeling the pressure of chasing that cup. And while Trevor Zegras wants it as much as the next guy, I think, he feels like, hey, my window is likely, odds are my window is a little bit longer. But this tough start for Nashville that's a pitch. Barry Trotz would have to make a sales pitch to Trevor Zegras, I think.
I'm going to slightly disagree with you on that. I think that Zegras strikes me as, for better or for worse, he strikes me as the type of player who kind of wants to be the guy.
That's
Nashville needs the guy. And
really? You think so?
No, I mean, they don't want someone with that attitude, but they really
Right.
do need someone to be the guy because they don't have a guy to be their 2C. They just don't.
Yeah.
So then I think, and you look at what's happening with Zegras in Anaheim, and he's kind of being pushed aside by this new wave of prospects they have coming in, like Leo Carlson and all
Right.
of them. So I think, and his production has suffered tremendously. And again, this, I don't know, correlation, causation, I don't know, but I'm just saying that he strikes me as kind of, he's in a situation right now in Anaheim where he's sort of an odd man out. And he doesn't really have a home, he's just kind of like on an island. He comes to Nashville, it's saying like, okay, this is your role. That you're the
True.
guy. This is your role. Now, my issue with that is that we talked about Andrew Brunette, short leash, young players. I just knowing what I know about Andrew Brunette and how he operates, and about Trevor Zegras and how old he is, and how, I should say, how not old he is, and how, every other guy that's come into this system has taken a minute to actually get up to speed with it. I would wonder, I was like, all right, if you bring a Zegras in, how long would his leash be? Because we see the leash with Tommy Novak has been exceptionally short. But then, on the other hand, you think, well, hypothetically, could it be better to get to these guys when they're younger and get them sort of indoctrinated into the system sooner, so it's not as much unlearning that they have to do, like we've seen with these new people that we've got? So I see it from all sides, and I think that Nashville would be appealing to him. Quite frankly, looking at him, dude, he scored a goal the other night for Anaheim, and it was his first goal, or like his second goal of the year. It was his first goal in a really long time. He didn't even look happy about it.
That's
I was
so
like,
rough.
is he okay? Like, I think like right now he just he wants to, I mean, this is my speculation 100%, but I would imagine he probably just wants to get out of Anaheim, and have a clear direction. And right now he's kind of like, he was brought in to be the guy, and then it's like, oh wait, actually we got these shiny new draft picks. They're going to be the guy. We don't really have a place for you now. And so they tried moving him to the wing. He didn't like it. He didn't play well there. It's just been, not a good situation for him. So you have to wonder, is this the year that it's finally going to happen, that he does get traded? And if so, what would the asking price be from Anaheim? And if he did come to Nashville, what would his leash look like?
Yeah, I think that is a very valid question. I want the guy conversation is the thing that makes me a little nervous about Trevor Zegras, because the one thing that for sure when it comes to Barry Trotz is he does not do divas. And I'm not speaking anything about Trevor Zegras because haven't hung out with him. But this is a locker room where you have to come in, and if you're going to come in and think that you are all that in a bag of chips while you're sitting getting dressed next to Steven Stamkos, that's probably not going to work. And so I think there would have to be assurances that the fit is there, just personality wise. And look, Luke Evangelista could not have more swagger than he walks with, while quoting Meemaw and Grandma Ruth. Like, this is a man who walks with swagger, but he also is such a great team guy. So I'm not saying that it can't happen, because it can happen. But I do think you have to make sure it's the right fit, because Barry Trotz wants to win a Stanley Cup, but he has a very specific vibe in the locker room with which he wants to get there. And
For
I
sure.
think, there is, whether it is true or not, there is sort of there's sort of some allure about Zegras and maybe the way he walks through life. I don't know if it's true. Good grief, he's 23 years old. He probably doesn't even know his own social security number.
Yeah, I was like, God, I would hate like anyone who met me when I was 23. I am
Oh my
sorry. Like
gosh, y'all.
totally different person. But I do think that like to a degree, and I mean no disrespect to Anaheim, this is just the fact of where they are in their, their rebuilding process, which has, been years in the making. I think that his sort of personality or this lore that you've alluded to, he was kind of in a place where he could kind of get away with it because
True.
it was like we don't have that entertaining of an on ice product right now, so we'll handle, like, we'll deal with the antics and whatever comes with this guy because
Mhm.
it's like we're in the entertainment business and he's entertaining. And
He is. Yeah.
now it's like, and not to say that Anaheim has never cared about winning. Of course they do. But like they just know where they are in their
Mhm.
process where it was like, all right, we're not contending for a cup this year. So let him cook. Just let him be who he is. And again, I don't know. When I say that he needs to be the guy, maybe there is like an ego attitude part of that, which, as you correctly said, Barry Trotz does not want. Andrew Burnett doesn't want it either. And
Can you imagine?
I don't think Roman Yossi or Ryan O'Reilly would let it happen. Like they would
No.
not allow that. So I think when I say the guy, I think there's still some truth to that in the sense that, what I said before, that he needs a direction. He needs a role.
Yeah.
Right now, he really doesn't have a, you know, eh, if I'm him and I'm in that situation, I'm thinking like this team doesn't really value me. Like I don't really feel valued. I don't feel like I'm an important piece of this team and their future anymore. And so I want to go somewhere where I am going to be an important part of what they're trying to accomplish. And he would be in Nashville. I mean, that would be why he would be expected to come in. Again, I am not saying, yes, absolutely go get Zegras. I'm just saying that, like, there are pros and cons. I can see both sides of it. I'm a little bit like, I would say left of center in like maybe don't go all in for him, like maybe just
Mhm.
kind of hold back a little bit. But I mean, as far as young centers go, like he's certainly, you could do a lot worse.
Yeah, absolutely could do a lot worse. It's a really intriguing thought and not one that I thought we would be discussing, but the way that the season has gone for Nashville, maybe Barry Trotz is making some, soft phone calls. We'll just call them like little soft calls. We don't know, but he is looking for a center. And one of the things that we've heard, Trevor Zegras spent a lot of time working on his 200-foot game. That's going to curl Barry Trotz's toes. Andrew Burnett would love that as well. So I am with you. This is something where there are some pros and some cons to it. And the situation in Nashville could be a situation where Trevor Zegras may work. But like you said, it's not the season yet. I don't expect anything in the near future to happen with this roster, but it's something to just sort of file away as things that we said hell no to in the offseason. But now we're like, well, there are pros and cons. That's just how it works in hockey, folks.
Yeah. Well, and if we're discussing a team which for this entire season so far, all we've been talking about is chemistry and they need to find chemistry, maybe introducing someone new is not the answer, like right now.
Yes. Yes.
Right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't have to be the dating game on the second line,
Yeah.
but we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see. That second line, of course, going to be back in action in whatever form it takes tomorrow against the Seattle Kraken. You remember that's a team that spanked the ever-loving fire out of the Nashville Predators earlier in the year. Can the Predators put together another strong performance? We're going to preview that game on tomorrow's show, so make sure you tune in for that. Before we sign off today, though, Emma, let everyone know where they can find you and your work.
You can find me on social media at Emma_Lingen, and you can find my work at the Hockey News.
And you can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work with Penalty Box Radio as well. That is going to do it for this Tuesday episode of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We will be back tomorrow with that game preview. We'll see you then.